The warning wasn't carved in stone. It was carved into the silence of dead worlds. Not written, not spoken, not even transmitted. It lingered embedded in the cold vacuum between stars, in the hollow shells of abandoned cities, in the drifting bones of civilizations that had once believed themselves eternal. Entire systems stood as monuments to a single unheeded truth. Planets stripped of life, orbital rings shattered into debris, their surfaces scorched in patterns too deliberate to be natural, too precise to be accidental. Exploration vessels that first stumbled upon these graveyards reported the same thing. Not fear, not confusion, but an absence so profound it felt intentional, as if something had passed through and erased not just life, but the idea that life had ever existed there. And yet, buried beneath layers of cosmic dust and decay, fragments remained, symbols etched into alloy that should have outlived stars, data cores, corrupted but persistent, warnings, repeated across species that had never met. Do not provoke the humans. At first, it was treated as myth, a coincidence, a pattern-seeking error by lesser minds trying to impose meaning onto entropy. The great empires, the coalition among them, dismissed it with quiet amusement. They had seen countless ruins, countless extinct species, each undone by their own flaws. War, greed, collapse, the usual endings. And humans? A minor species, tucked away in an unremarkable spiral arm, late to the cosmic stage. Fragile, divided. Their history read like a cautionary tale of internal conflict. Nations rising and falling, wars fought over lines on maps, progress constantly threatened by their own nature. Even their greatest achievements seemed inefficient, emotional, reckless, hardly the architects of galactic extinction. So the warning became a curiosity, then a joke, then nothing at all. But there were a few, quiet observers, archivists, those who listened more than they spoke, who felt something else when they studied those dead systems. A pattern beneath the pattern, not in the destruction, but in the timing. Civilizations had thrived for millions of cycles, only to vanish abruptly, not gradually, not chaotically, but all at once, as if a switch had been flipped, as if something had decided enough. One such observer, long forgotten in the records, had left behind a final note before their disappearance. It was never officially acknowledged, buried deep within classified archives, dismissed as paranoia. Power does not make a species dangerous. The note read, predictability does. And humans are not predictable. They endure what should break them. They adapt in ways that defy logic. And when pushed to the edge, the message ended there, cut off mid-thought. No explanation, no conclusion, only silence. And now, as fleets gathered on the edge of human space, engines humming, weapons primed, commanders confident in their inevitable victory, that ancient silence began to feel less like emptiness and more like a held breath, waiting. The warship Dominion spear did not glide into Earth's orbit. It claimed it. Its arrival bent the very light around it. A colossal silhouette emerging from folded space-time, like a blade slipping free of reality's sheath. Hull plates the size of continents locked into place with seismic finality, each one etched with the sigils of conquered systems. Energy pulsed beneath its surface in slow, deliberate rhythms, like the heartbeat of something far too vast to be called a ship. Inside, the observation deck stretched in a seamless arc of transparent alloy, offering an uninterrupted view of the planet below. Earth, blue, fragile, alive. Admiral Virex stood motionless at the center, his hands clasped behind his back, posture carved from discipline. His eyes, cold, calculating, studied the world not with awe, but with quiet evaluation. Cloud systems drifted like soft scars across oceans that shimmered under distant sunlight. Thin lines of artificial light traced continents, evidence of a civilization still clinging to its night. Primitive, exposed. Behind him, the coalition fleet completed its formation. Thousands of vessels slipped into position with mechanical precision. Dreadnoughts, carriers, siege platforms, an armada so vast it eclipsed entire constellations. Their combined presence turned orbit into a cage of steel and firepower. A silent verdict passed before the first shot was ever fired. "They know we're here," an officer said, voice low, almost reverent. Virex didn't turn. "Of course they do." He watched as human satellites adjusted, some attempting evasive maneuvers, others broadcasting frantic signals across the electromagnetic spectrum. Communication bursts lit up the darkness like panicked heartbeats. It was chaotic, disorganized, exactly as the reports had described. Final transmission prepared. The officer continued. Standard integration terms. Surrender, assimilation, preservation of biological assets. A pause. No response expected. Virex allowed himself the faintest exhale. This was not war. Not really. This was procedure. The absorption of yet another lesser species into the coalition's ever-expanding order. Their resistance, if it came at all, would be brief, symbolic, a final, futile gesture before inevitability closed its grip. Transmit it, he said. Across the void, the message surged toward Earth, encoded in every known frequency, translated into every known language, crafted to be understood whether received by machine or mind. It carried the weight of absolute authority, the promise of survival at the cost of freedom. Seconds passed, then minutes. The planet remained unchanged. No unified reply, no formal surrender, only fragmented signals, scattered across networks, overlapping, contradicting. Millions of voices speaking at once, none in harmony. Virex frowned just slightly. They're not coordinating, the officer noted. No central command structure detected. Then they're already defeated, Virex replied, though something in his tone had shifted, just enough to be felt, not heard. He leaned forward, studying the surface more closely now. Cities pulsed with life. Aircraft streaked through skies. Tiny, insignificant movements on a world that didn't yet understand what stood above it, or perhaps refused to understand. Begin phase 1, he ordered. The words were soft, effortless, but across the fleet, they ignited a storm. Weapon arrays unfolded like mechanical wings. Energy built in silent crescendos. Targeting systems locked onto thousands of coordinates in perfect synchronization. Military installations, defense grids, communication hubs. Every nerve center of the planet marked for instant erasure, for a fleeting moment. The stars themselves seemed to dim, as if even the universe hesitated. Then the sky over Earth flickered and burned. The first strike didn't sound like war. There was no thunder in space, no roar to mark the moment civilization was cut open. Only light, cold, precise, and merciless, lancing down from orbit in perfect silence. From the surface, it appeared as a constellation of falling stars, beautiful, almost serene, right until they touched the ground. Then the world changed. Defense grids vanished in an instant, their power signatures snuffed out like candles in a storm. Military command centers, buried deep beneath mountains, hidden beneath oceans, were reduced to expanding spheres of white heat. Communication arrays blinked out across continents, one by one, as if an unseen hand was pressing its finger down on every vital nerve of the planet. Inside the Dominion Spear, Admiral Virex watched it unfold with clinical detachment. Tactical displays updated in real time. Each successful strike marked with a soft pulse of light. Efficient, controlled, predictable. Victory. And yet, they're still transmitting, the analyst said. The words cut to the quiet like a fracture. Virex didn't react at first. Clarify. Signal traffic hasn't collapsed. It's increased. The analyst's voice tightened. We're detecting broadcasts from thousands, no, millions of independent sources. Civilian devices. Emergency channels. Unregistered nodes. That's not possible, another officer added. We targeted their infrastructure. Their coordination should be gone. Virex's gaze sharpened. Put on display. The main holofield shifted, and chaos bloomed. Not silence, not surrender. Noise. A storm of fragmented signals flooded the screen, overlapping in a dizzying web of transmissions. Audio bursts, data packets, encrypted pulses. None of them aligned. None of them centralized. It looked like the sorter until it didn't. They're adapting, the analyst whispered. Decentralizing in real time. There's no command hub because everything is a command hub. Virex felt it then, that faint, unwelcome tension curling at the edge of his thoughts. Insignificant, he said. though the word carried less weight than before. They cannot coordinate at scale. But even as he spoke, new alerts ignited across the display. Unidentified vessels launching from surface. A sensor officer called out. Virex turned. Evacuation craft? A pause. Negative. The holofield zoomed in. Small shapes, crude, angular, barely space-worthy. Burst free from hidden hangars, from beneath cities, from places no military blueprint had marked. They didn't form ranks. They didn't establish formations. They just accelerated, straight toward the fleet. They're not powering weapons, the officer said, confusion bleeding into fear. No shield signatures either. Then what are they doing? No one answered. The first impact came without warning. A human vessel. Little more than reinforced metal wrapped around an engine, slammed into the hull of a coalition cruiser. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the cruiser split open. Fire blossomed outward in a silent scream, tearing through decks, rupturing systems, vending atmosphere into the void. The explosion wasn't elegant. It wasn't controlled. It was violent, raw, personal. Shock rippled through the command deck. That was a suicide strike, someone said, barely able to process the words. Another impact, then another. Across the outer edges of the fleet, human ships collided with anything they could reach, deliberate, unflinching, unstoppable. No evasive maneuvers, no hesitation. Each one a calculated sacrifice. They're not engaging strategically, the analyst said, voice shaking now. They're targeting for maximum disruption. They don't care about survival, only damage. Virex stared at the unfolding chaos, his certainty cracking piece by piece. This wasn't warfare as he understood it. There were no lines, no logic, no preservation of assets. Only intent. Cold, focused, terrifying intent. They're throwing themselves at us, he said slowly, the realization settling like ice in his chest. On the display, another coalition ship vanished in a bloom of fire, and for the first time since entering orbit, Admiral Virex began to understand. The humans weren't trying to win. They were trying to make sure the enemy lost. Admiral, the voice didn't belong in a war room. It was too quiet, too fragile. Virex turned, irritation already forming, until he saw the analyst's expression. Pale, unsteady, eyes locked on something far beyond the chaos of the battlefield. You need to see this. The holofield shifted, not to tactical data, but to archives, ancient ones, fragments pulled from civilizations long erased, species whose names have been reduced to dust and corrupted code. At first, it looked like noise, broken languages, incomplete records, disconnected histories. But then the system began aligning them, translating, synchronizing patterns across time and species that had never met, never even known of each other's existence. And suddenly, it wasn't noise anymore. It was a message. Do not provoke the humans. The same warning. Again, and again, and again. Virex felt the air in the chamber grow colder, though he knew that was impossible. Enhance context, he ordered, his voice lower now. The display obeyed. Worlds appeared, thousands of years apart, scattered across distant regions of space, each one thriving, advanced, stable, then gone, not gradually, not through decline or internal collapse. Abruptly, entire populations erased within single cycles. Infrastructure left shattered in patterns eerily consistent with what now unfolded outside their own hull. Orbital debris fields, scorched planetary surfaces, gravitational anomalies where none should exist. They all made contact with humanity. The analyst said, barely above a whisper, or something they thought was humanity. A pause, and then they pushed too far. Another layer of data surfaced. Decoded fragments of last transmissions. Not cries for help. Not surrender pleas. Warnings. They don't stop. We thought they were primitive. They turned our own strategies against us. This isn't war, this is... The final logs always cut off the same way. Mid-sentence. Mid-thought. As if there had been no time left to finish them. Virex stepped closer to the display, his reflection flickering across the ruined worlds. "This proves nothing," he said, though the conviction was gone. "Correlation is not causation." "They weren't powerful," the analyst pressed, desperation creeping in. "Not at first. Every record says the same thing. Divided, chaotic, inferior technology. But when threatened..." The screen shifted again, not to destruction this time, to adaptation. Human designs, primitive at first, evolving rapidly, weapons repurposed from civilian tools, communication networks transforming into decentralized command systems, strategies that made no sense until they worked. "They don't follow doctrine," the analyst said. "They rewrite it in real time." Virex's jaw tightened. Outside, another explosion rippled through the fleet, briefly illuminating the stars with fire. "They weaponize loss," the analyst continued. "Every defeat becomes data. Every sacrifice becomes strategy. They don't fear destruction the way we do." "Enough," Virex snapped. But it came too late, because the final piece had already appeared. A single, partially restored document, older than the rest. Clearer, a direct translation. Humans are not dangerous because of their strength. They are dangerous because they will do what others won't. Silence fell over the command deck. Heavy, suffocating. For a moment, no one spoke. No one moved. Then, "Admiral," another officer said, voice trembling, "we're losing long-range scans." Virex turned sharply. "Explain." "Earth, it's..." The words faltered. On the main display, the planet flickered. Once, twice, then vanished. Not destroyed, not obscured, gone. Every sensor returned the same result. Empty space where a living world had existed seconds before. No debris, no energy signature, no trace. Just absence. A cold, impossible void. The analyst's voice broke the silence, barely audible. "They've gone dark." Virex stared at the emptiness, the ancient warning echoing in his mind. No longer a relic of forgotten species, but a message he had understood far too late. And somewhere in that unnatural silence, something was waiting. For 3 seconds, the universe forgot Earth existed. No signal, no heat signature, no gravitational variance. Just a clean, impossible void where an entire living world had been. On the bridge of the Dominion Spear, silence tightened like a vice. Every system strained against the absence, recalibrating, searching, rejecting its own conclusions. Sensors flickered, algorithms looped. Reality itself seemed to hesitate, as if unsure how to process what it could no longer perceive. Then, Earth came back, not gradually, not with the soft return of data stabilizing. It snapped into existence, as if something had released its grip on the fabric of detection. But it wasn't the same. It felt awake. Multiple emissions detected. The sensor officer gasped. "Global scale, no orbital. No, it's everything." Virex stepped forward, his pulse now betraying the calm his voice still tried to hold. "Define everything." The answer came in light. Every satellite surrounding Earth, military, civilian, obsolete, forgotten, ignited at once. Thousands of points flared into synchronized brilliance, forming a luminous web that wrapped the planet in a shifting lattice of signal and power. Even debris fields, dead machinery long dismissed as harmless, came alive, their dormant cores reactivating in perfect unison. It wasn't random. It was orchestrated. A single transmission surged outward, not broadcast, but forced, slamming into coalition systems with overwhelming precision. Firewalls dissolved. Encryption shattered. Protocols bent and broke as the signal carved its way into every screen, every speaker, every mind interface aboard the fleet. The bridge flooded with a human voice. "Calm, steady, unafraid. You thought we'd fight to win." The words settled into the silence like gravity. Virex felt them more than heard them, felt the weight behind them, the certainty. A pause followed, not empty, but deliberate, measured. "We fight to survive." Outside, space itself began to move. At first, it was subtle, a distortion at the edge of perception. Light bending where it shouldn't. Stars stretching into thin, trembling lines. Then the sensors caught up and screamed. gravitational anomalies forming across the sector, origin points, asteroid belts, debris clusters, wreckage from our own destroyed ships. They were seeded. The analyst choked. All of it. Prepositioned. Virex's breath hitched. That's impossible. We would have detected. They wanted us to detect nothing. The realization struck like a physical blow. This battlefield had been built long before they arrived. The human voice returned, softer now, almost human. And if we can't, the first rupture tore open near the outer fleet. Space collapsed inward, folding like fabric under unbearable tension. A coalition destroyer was caught at the edge, its hull stretching, screaming apart without sound as it was dragged into a point that no longer obeyed the laws of existence. Then another, and another, chain reactions ignited across the stars. Hidden devices awakened in cascading sequence, each one amplifying the next. Artificial gravity wells bloomed like invisible supernovas, pulling ships off course, slamming them into each other, ripping formations into chaos. We make sure you don't either. The fleet disintegrated. Commands were issued, but there was no one left to follow them. Navigation failed. Weapons misfired. Entire squadrons vanished as localized singularities blinked in and out of existence, devouring anything too slow to escape. Virex gripped the command console, his reflection fractured across a dozen flickering displays. This wasn't a battle. There were no fronts, no strategies left to execute, only consequences. Human ships, what few remained, continued their relentless charges, diving into crippled vessels, triggering secondary explosions, feeding the chaos they had unleashed. Every action, every sacrifice, perfectly aligned with a plan that had never needed their survival to succeed. This was never about victory. It was about denial. If humanity could not stand unchallenged, then no one would. As the Dominion spears shuddered under the strain of collapsing space, Virex finally understood the true meaning of the warning. Not fear, not myth, but inevitability. Humanity didn't win wars. They ended them. Silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one had weight. It pressed against the shattered remains of the battlefield, settling into the twisted metal, the drifting corpses of ships that had once ruled entire systems. What remained of the coalition fleet floated in broken fragments, hulls torn open like paper, engines dark, command towers hollowed into graves. The stars themselves seemed distant now, their light dim behind the slow-moving veil of debris. At the center of it all, the Dominion spear still lived. Barely. Emergency systems flickered in erratic pulses, casting long, unstable shadows across the ruined command deck. Consoles sparked. Air leaked in soft, whispering breaths through fractured seams. The once proud flagship, symbol of absolute power, was now just another wounded relic, drifting without direction. Admiral Virex remained at his post. He hadn't moved in a long time. His uniform was scorched, one side of his face streaked with dry blood. His eyes, once sharp with certainty, now fixed on a single point beyond the fractured viewport. Earth, still there, still whole, still alive. It glowed faintly in the distance, untouched by the devastation it had unleashed. Clouds drifted across its surface, as if nothing had happened. Oceans reflected the light of a distant sun. From this far away, it looked peaceful, innocent. It was neither. A weak signal crackled through the broken communications array, cutting through the static like a ghost forcing its way back into the world. Virex didn't react at first. He simply listened. The same voice. Human. Calm. You're still there, it said. Not a question. A quiet acknowledgement. Virex swallowed, his throat dry, his voice a shadow of what it once was. What are you? The answer didn't come immediately. For a moment, there was only the hum of failing systems and the distant creak of a dying ship. Then, we're what happens when survival isn't optional. Virex closed his eyes. The words didn't sound like a threat. They didn't need to. We didn't start this. The voice continued, softer now, almost tired. We tried to warn you. Every species that came before you tried to warn you. Images flickered through his mind. Dead worlds, broken archives, messages dismissed as superstition, ignored. You saw the signs. The voice said, you just chose not to understand them. The transmission wavered, as if even it was struggling to endure the aftermath. "Remember this," it added. Virex forced his eyes open, staring at the distant blue world, at the species he had come to conquer, and instead awakened. "We can be reasoned with. We can be negotiated with. We can even be defeated." A pause, long enough to matter, but if you push us far enough. The signal fractured, breaking apart into static. And then, silence. Real silence this time. Final. The lights on the Dominion spear dimmed, one by one, as the last of its power faded into nothing. Systems shut down. Displays went dark. Life support whispered its final breath. Admiral Virex remained where he stood, staring into the void as it slowly claimed him. In his final moments, there was no anger, no defiance, only understanding. Far beyond the wreckage, Earth continued to turn, quiet, distant, unbroken. A single world in an endless universe. But now, the universe knew, and somewhere, carried across the stars and drifting signals and dying echoes, the ancient warning lived on, no longer ignored, but remembered.